I just want to show you, I want to give you these 4 things. There's 4 things in this passage that I want you to hear. These are kind of guidelines. Now, normally, and if you're a guest here, please know my major purpose, my major goal, whenever we gather and you hear teaching from me, I want you to walk out saying, what a great Jesus I have. And this sermon is a little bit different than that. I hope you still will. But this is kind of like, look at what Christ has done for us. How do we live as his family? How do we live as his family without chipping at each other, without judging or condemning, but building one another up? How do we do that? Because this is a very practical problem that they're wrestling with. Sorry, Tanya, here I'm jumping the gun. We need to go on back here a little bit. So what's interesting to me as we look at this particular piece, we ask this question. So here's the thing that happened. When I first came here almost 17 years ago, so I'd come from Portland, and I hadn't lived in an area that had a large, kind of a majority of LDS population, and I was just really curious. How does this go? And what's kind of history been? And how do we communicate with our neighbors? Because we're compelled to love our neighbors, right? Isn't that right? We're under command. It's not optional for us. We're not allowed to kind of disregard some people and like others, So I said, how do we do that? And I remember I was at a gathering, a church. We have about 8 of our churches, these Lutheran churches in eastern Idaho, and we were gathering. And I kind of asked about it, and guys were talking to me. It was good. It was real helpful. And this one guy comes up and he says, well, here's what I do. When my Mormon neighbor comes over, every time he comes in, I go crack open a beer. And I said, why? Why do you do that? He says, well, because I can and they're not allowed to. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He says, well, I have Christian freedom. And I said, I don't think that's what Paul meant. I said, I don't know about that. I said, because really, I love my neighbors, man. We're all human, right? Ups and downs, goods and bads, it's all challenge. But man, I love my neighbors. I want them to know Jesus like we know Jesus, the whole Jesus, whole thing. And I thought, that's not Christian freedom. And so here we've got this lesson that Ruth read. Thanks, Ruth, for honoring the word. And Paul says, hey, you guys, we got a problem here. Because here's the deal. It's a very practical problem. If you wanted to have kind of protein in the first century in the Roman Empire, you needed to get some meat or fish or something like that. So you could pretty well always get fish. That wasn't used in idol worship and stuff like that. But meat, lamb and pork, and, Jews aren't supposed to eat pork, and beef and other mutton and, all that kind of stuff. The vast majority of it, if you went to the market, like if you went to Winco to go get yourself some meat, it was probably, and you didn't always know, sacrificed in an idol ceremony. Because, right, it's the Roman Empire, all those Roman gods, even Caesar was considered a god. You were required to make sacrifices. And so this is an awkward thing for Jews. Back in Deuteronomy, it says, hey, don't be doing this. In fact, it's a strong injunction. Back when the Israelites were coming into the land, I don't know if you know the story of the guy with the talking donkey, Balaam and his donkey. And his trick, he said, here's how we're going to get those Israelites to mess up. Let's get them to eat food sacrificed to idols. You get why? They'll start participating. And if they want to get food, they'll have to come to the ceremony, and we're going to get them. And God says, don't you be doing that. In fact, even in the New Testament, in Revelation, it's like Revelation chapter 2, I think it's the church in Pergamum, God says, I'm critical of you because you've been messing around with idol worship, and you're participating in their festivals. And he says literally, you're eating food sacrificed to idols. And then, sorry you guys for this history. I hope I'm not boring you. Hang with me for just a minute. The first big controversy in the church is Acts chapter 15. And the question is, how Jewish do you have to be a Christian? Okay, that was the question. And they debate it. And I love Peter's response. Peter is so great. He stands up. Peter's really not the head of the church. It's Jesus' brother, James, his half-brother, James. And Peter gets up. He's a missionary to the Jews. Paul was a missionary to the Gentile world. And Peter gets up and he says, what are we talking about here? We couldn't keep the law. We're Jewish. We couldn't do it. Why do we want to make them do it? Because we can't. So they send out this letter. It's really great. It's one of the great moments in church history. So this is the letter they send out to all the Gentile Christians. And I won't read the whole thing, but they says, thank you for Paul and Barnabas. And he says, it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us to not burden you with anything beyond the following requirements. You are to abstain from food sacrificed to idols. That's one. From blood, that was part of the same thing. From the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual immorality. So it's really two things. Don't eat this food that's used for idol worship, and be sexually pure, right? Because that was the problem in the pagan culture. They were just sleeping with whoever, doing whatever, eating whatever. It didn't matter. God said, I want you to keep yourself free from those two things, right? Of course, this probably doesn't work out for us because even in the garden, we couldn't do one thing right. So it's interesting that this topic comes up. So they're probably saying, how do we get food? How do we get meat? Where are we going to get our meat from? And so Paul goes into this explanation in 1 Corinthians 8. And so here's how it is, because there's two problems that are going to arise here. You can either get people who say, I'm free in Christ, doesn't matter, I can do anything I want, right? Because that's often how we interpret freedom, don't we? Freedom means I can do anything I want. Now, we know better if we're thoughtful for just 2 seconds, because that means license. You can't drive 120 miles an hour through the school zone, okay? But no, I'm free. I can do anything I want. No, we know better than that. But that's how we think. I'm free. I can do anything I want. The question that's key is to say, as a follower of Christ, what do you want? Right? I'm in Christ. What do I want? And so let me give you the 4 things now. Tanya, you're awesome. Thanks for being patient with me. The first one is knowledge. This is what Paul's going to talk about. The second one is love. The third one is responsibility. And the fourth one is sacrifice. That's what he's going to talk about here. How do we live together? Because here's the problem. So some of them are going away just eating meat, the sacrifice, no big deal. You know why? Because theologically, they know there's no problem with this. Theologically, there's no idol. It's just a hunk of rock. Or it's a stick. Or it's just nothing. There's nothing there. Paul says that. We know that. Theologically, there's nothing there. So what's wrong with eating the food that's there? On the other hand, you got people who say, well, I'll never dare touch any of that, and therefore I'm better than you, more holy than you, more righteous than you. Those are the 2 extremes we got cooking. So Paul's giving guidance. Because now, you might say, well, I haven't gone to any pagan festivals recently, right? Or seen a goat butchered and slaughtered and burnt in front of the god of whatever, Pocatello. So how does this apply to me? Let me give you a couple of examples. Back in the day, we used to argue about worship, how you worship. So like at our 8:30 service, organ, I wear a robe, choir, liturgy, formal, very formal. And then in the 80s, we started doing stuff, God forbid, we brought in a drum set, Bobby. Oh my goodness, David, brought in a drum set and guitar and a bass, and it was a rock band, man, and so people freaked out. Here's another one. How old is the earth? People went to school. People learned under professors. And Christians would argue and go to war. Or what movies can you see? I saw a Baptist preacher the other day. I was watching a YouTube video, and he said, hey, how many of you, this is an old one. He said, how many of you went and saw Footloose? And they raised their hand. He said, gotcha. So they're not supposed to go see movies, I guess. I don't know. That's a pretty strict Baptist denomination, if you ask me. But, it was like, I saw you at the bar, or this or that. Can you have a beer? Like, here's an interesting one. My first, 3 years here, we had Oktoberfest, and we didn't have beer. That's weird, isn't it? Oktoberfest, no beer? That's weird. I was nervous. I was really anxious. I have alcoholism in my family. I'm telling you, Paul makes a statement at the end of this text. He says, if my action will cause a brother to fall, I will never do it again. I'll never do it. If me having a beer causes you to fail, I will never have another one. Certainly not in front of you. Sneak in the corner. But you get what I'm saying? How can that be? So they got themselves a dilemma. Okay, because like for the first 3 years I said no. Then when we finally did do beer, I said, okay, you got to get a wristband and you can only have 2 tickets, and and you guys have been awesome. It's been great. It's been fun. And it's been thoughtful, and it's been careful. And now I just want to give you, like in worship, for years and years, fight. I remember when I was on the call list here and I was on the interview, and I said, hey, tell me about worship. And somebody said, well, we got the Holy Rollers at 11 and we got the Frozen Chosen at 8:30. And I was dead silent on the phone, just dead silent. I'll bet 10 seconds went by, and I said, if you extend this call to me and I come there, I hope I never hear that again. I hope I never hear it. Because we're the family of God. We don't need worship boards. In both of our services, do we hold up Christ? In both of our services, do we acknowledge our brokenness? In both of our services, do you hear a pronouncement of grace? Right? Do we come to the table? Do we hear from the Word? Amen. So we used to do that. So I'm just telling you, that's the equivalent. So they had this challenge. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? Four things. So when I do Life in Christ, by the way, if you haven't decided yet, please come tomorrow, 6:30. It's awesome. We got a number of people coming, 6:30. Introduces you to this church and to what we teach. And you can come if you're a member too. It's all good. So I tell that class every time, I say, I have you go 12 weeks, and the other pastors in this town think I'm insane. They say to me, it's great, this is great. They go, how can you get people to come 12 weeks? And I said, I'm more interesting than you. No, but I tell them, this is important. We talk about important things. Because I said, bumper sticker theology is not good enough. You know what that is, right? God said it, I believe it, that settles it. Slap that sucker on your bumper, good to go. No, you're not. Not today. Never, to be honest, but not today. You need to know why. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? What's it about? So knowledge matters. The first one is knowledge. They knew. Paul says to the group, look, we know all about this. That idol that they're worshiping, they're going to the temple of Jupiter or Mars, or they're going to Aphrodite, or wherever they're going. There's nothing there. No one's home. It's just hunks of rock and stuff like that. So theologically, we know that. By the way, how does that go when you tell your neighbor who's maybe doesn't believe what you believe and says, you're all screwed up? How's that go? Good? Does that work for you? So you know the theology. You know that there's a greater Jesus, that there's more. You know that there's so much more and so much more richness and depth. God's grace is so full. It's so great. You know that, but that theology doesn't help you if it is not accompanied by and preceded by love. That's point 2. Point 2. You see, knowledge is great, and I love sharing knowledge. I love my seminary education. I love being able to discuss and help answer questions for people from the Bible and theologically. But it was really powerful yesterday. We did a funeral for Caitlin Williamson, 22 years old, graduate of our school through 8th grade, and now is an orphan at 22. Both parents passed. And we did her dad's 2016, and this mom just passed. And she picked for me, she said, I want you to preach on 1 Corinthians 13, love chapter. When you strip everything away, you have faith, hope, and love. Right? What foundation do you stand upon? What's the certainty for your future? and love. And Paul says, and the greatest of these is love. The greatest is love. First. So, is knowledge important? Absolutely. I tell people this often. It's more important to do right than to be right. Right? You can be right on an issue, but you got to be right with the people God has put in front of you. Like I'll tell young pastors when they're brand new, I'll say, don't hammer on your people at all for a year. Don't preach law, heavy law to them. You don't know them well enough. You haven't earned the right. You earn the right to tell someone, I think you're going sideways. And I love you enough to say, I think you're wrong here. Come back. Reel it in. You overstepped. It ain't no fun for your pastor to do it either. But you do it. I think this is one of the joys of me being with you as long as I've been. I think you know I like you a little bit. And so, but that's the thing. But love comes first. So here's what I wrote down. It's better to do right than to simply be right. But we must be right in order to do right. So you can't do the right thing operating off a flimsy, shifting foundation. You got to have your foundation and then act. You don't have to tell everybody every detail of what's in your foundation. But out of that foundation, we care for people. See, knowledge is about self. Love is about others. Third thing. Let me go on this love one. I got to give you this, because this is an illustration about food sacrificed to idols. See if I can make this connection well. So as a teenager, I was in middle school, my Aunt Evelyn, who's now 97 years old, gave me Sports Illustrated, gave me, what do you call it, subscription to, I was going to say prescription, subscription to Sports Illustrated. So I get this, I'm like 12. Lo and behold, along in, I don't know when it is, it's in the winter sometime, there's a swimsuit edition, which my mom saw and snagged and never let me have it any year that I lived at home. And then I didn't live at home. So my mom did that because she loved me. She wasn't being mean. She did that because she loved me. And in those years when I was by myself, I thought to myself, I have freedom in Christ. I know that this is not significant. I know that there's nothing important. Let us gaze upon these images in Christian freedom. I got married, and I'm not often very proud of myself, but this one I'm going to say I did pretty good. We got married, and I said to my wife, honey, there's this thing that's going to come in the mailbox, and I need you to take it away every year. And she did. God bless her. Until Sports Illustrated got so weird, I canceled the subscription. So anyway, that's love. I did that because I loved my wife and didn't want to dishonor her in thought or in deed. Anyway, third thing. So around here we started lots of ministries. Love it. It's really fun. We've built buildings. We've added staff. We've done lots of neat ministry, living activity. We've taken on back to school. Our school has expanded, high school, all kinds of things. Expanded early childhood. We've done a lot of things. When I meet with the team and we do our discussions and with leadership, I'm excited for what happens. Those of you that know me know, man, I'm all in. Let's go do that thing. But I'm also the guy, I think my team sometimes gets frustrated with me because I'm always asking the question, how could this go wrong? How could it go wrong? Where are the spots where it could go wrong? It doesn't mean I don't want to do it. A lot of times people will say, here's why you can't do that. And that's been a great hallmark of this church. When I've proposed crazy, weird ideas, nobody says to me, I don't think we can do that. The church goes, how can we do that? Okay, here's a plan. And God has been good to us. But it's interesting, I'll ask, because why? Look at what it says in the text here. Be careful. In fact, these might be the two most important words in the whole text. Be careful. Be full of care when you're making decisions. Be careful that the exercise of your freedom does not become a stumbling block to the weak. Be full of care. Be thoughtful. In other words, what I'm thinking is, if we do this, could this damage this person? Will this hurt this person's journey with Christ? Will this prevent them? Will this create an obstacle? We answer them usually, or we address it. But I'm asking the question all the time. This is a mark of the Christian community. It's not just to say, oh, I'm just going to I'm going to do this thing. Who cares? There's always a wake when you do stuff. And sometimes you got to know that there are people who can't swim. You know, he says this, we know about all these things. We know that an idol isn't anything. And he says in the text, but not everybody knows this. And so that calls for taking some responsibility. Taking some responsibility because we're part of the body. So we think about that, not to prevent doing it, but so that in doing it, we are caring for the body. So that all are cared, not just the goal. Last thing, the fourth one is sacrifice. This is a tricky one because, and I don't know about you, I had to do this for myself, and maybe you guys are much better than me, but I had to stop and think, when is the last time I really made a sacrifice where I forego something? I don't buy that new car for a year. I don't take that vacation. I don't mean sacrifice like I gave up chocolate for a month. I mean where I set aside, boy, that's a mark of the Christian community. And I will tell you, I think one of its primary ways of living out is patience. Not everyone agrees all the time. Not everybody is on the same page at the first place. We've been blessed to do things here in Pocatello that's away from the center of Lutheranism that allows us to be patient because we're walking with people. To be patient because we can see them walking towards Christ. And so sometimes that calls for sacrifice. And so I love again this piece. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again so that I will not cause him to fall. I think of COVID, the whole COVID thing we went through, right? There were a couple times I was so tempted, I wanted to get on an airplane with all of my documentation on why it is so stupid to have to wear a mask in the most hypoallergenically clear place in the world. I'm going to give you my papers. And refuse to wear my mask. And I wore my mask. Of course I did. Of course I did. Because I don't want to hurt my brother. How does that hurt me? I don't want to hurt my brother. And those are just silly, dumb examples from how we are. And so as the people of Christ, because here's the thing, I'll end it with this. Here's the grace part of this. Every one of these things are reflections of how Christ acts towards us first. We're known by God, fully known. And can you imagine he still loves you? That he knows you that well and still loves you, adores you? So he knows us fully and loves us deeply. And I've never phrased it this way before, but I thought about that. I said, I think this is good. God actually takes responsibility for our sins. It says in 1 Corinthians, it says, he who knew no sin became sin. It doesn't say he put him in a backpack and carried him. Like, oh, those are their sins, but I'll carry it. It doesn't say that. He became sin. He was cursed. He took the responsibility of our sin and sacrificed that we might be his own. The marks of the Christian community, the marks of the family of God, I see it all the time. Praise God, let's pray. Let's pray that he fans it in a flame to the glory of Christ. Amen.